The morning of my 70th birthday felt like every other morning of my life, quiet, predictable, and lonely in a way I'd grown used to. I made my usual cup of strong, unsweetened tea and oatmeal, the same way I'd done for decades. Even on a milestone birthday, I didn't see the point in changing routines. Habit is a form of comfort, especially when the rest of life feels like it's slipping from your control. Sunlight streamed through the window of my modest house on the edge of Kendallville, Indiana. It was spotless. As always, I'd spent the night before ironing the old snow-white tablecloth I only took out on special occasions. The silver cutlery, my mother's, had been polished until it gleamed. The fine porcelain set my late husband Raymond gave me for our 20th anniversary was carefully laid out on the table, each plate centered perfectly. I didn't want a party. I thought it was ridiculous to celebrate being 1 year closer to the grave. But my daughter, Martha, insisted. "Mom, 70 isn't just a birthday, it's a milestone," she'd said. I gave in. I'd grown softer with age. Not long ago, I was the type of woman who never backed down, who ran her household with precision and didn't tolerate nonsense. But now I found myself agreeing to things, just to keep the peace, and sometimes regretting it. In the bathroom mirror, I studied my face, deep wrinkles around my eyes, lips that had forgotten how to smile. I was never a beauty. But over time, my face had gained something else. Some would call it character. I called it the weight of living. My gray hair was pulled back in the same tight bun I'd worn since I was 30, since the day I buried Raymond. He died of a heart attack at 42, leaving me with 3 children and a mortgage. Maybe if he had lived, I wouldn't have turned into this steel-willed woman who never allowed herself to cry in front of her kids. But life didn't offer alternatives, it only handed me what was, and I had to make it enough. The phone rang. It was Martha. Checking in. "Need anything before we come over?" "Mom," I told her everything was ready and reminded her not to forget the extra chairs. Our family never hired help for anything we could do ourselves. I raised my children on that principle. If you've got 2 hands, you've got enough. After the call, I pulled my signature apple pie out of the oven. Cinnamon and vanilla filled the kitchen with warmth. It smelled like childhood, my grandmother's house. Safe and simple. Guests were coming in 2 hours. My daughter, my sons, their spouses and children, and one name that stirred something deeper. Quentin, my grandson, my favorite, though I never said it aloud. But lately, things had changed. He wasn't the boy who used to help me in the garden. He had become someone harder, colder, and I feared this birthday, like many before it, would be remembered not for joy, but for a silence that spoke too loudly. Before o'clock, the house was full of noise, laughter, footsteps, the occasional clatter of silverware against china on the surface. Everything seemed warm and festive, but inside me, something felt off. The kind of quiet dread you feel before a thunderstorm breaks. Warren arrived first. Just as I expected. My youngest son had always been punctual, almost to a fault. He handed me a neatly wrapped box inside. No doubt was a silk scarf. He gave me one every birthday. I always smiled, thanked him, and placed it in the top drawer of my dresser. Never to be worn. It was our little ritual. Our relationship had always been built on quiet, predictable gestures, more habit than heart. Next came Martha, my daughter, and her husband Paul, their teenage daughter Allison in tow. Martha swept into the house like a tornado, kissing me, praising the smell of the pie, barking instructions at Paul to bring in the chairs. You look wonderful. Mom, she said with the fake warmth we saved for holidays. We both knew I looked exactly how a 70-year-old widow should worn. Tired. And forgotten by time. More relatives trickled in nieces. Cousins. Even Gladys. My neighbor and dear friend of 30 years. We filled the living room with the usual topics: weather, health, politics. Everyone played their roles perfectly. I smiled. Nodded. Thanked them for their gifts. Another candle. Another generic book I'd never read. Another vase. But 2 names remained absent. Ashley. Warren's daughter. And Quentin. Ashley had warned she'd be late from work. But Quentin, he'd been late for everything lately if he bothered to show up at all. Just as Martha began serving soup at 6 o'clock, the front door slammed open. Quentin. His arrival cut through the room like a blade. He didn't take off his shoes. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look embarrassed. Sorry I'm late, he muttered, his tone making it clear he wasn't sorry in the slightest. His eyes were glassy, and his steps uneven. The sharp smell of whiskey and cigarettes followed him in like a shadow. He kissed me on the cheek, a cold, careless gesture, and dropped into the empty seat next to Ashley, who looked at him with visible discomfort. Warren cleared his throat. A family signal for disapproval. But no one said a word. The air grew tight. Quentin brought his own bottle of wine and poured freely, sipping with the kind of anger that simmers beneath a smile. I tried to diffuse it. How's the restaurant? Quentin. He grunted. It'd be fine if people weren't trying to sabotage it. Paul, ever the peacekeeper, tried to steer the conversation. What do you mean? My ex, Bryn. She opened a cafe 3 blocks from mine. Total coincidence. Right. I frowned. Bryn has every right to open her own place. It's a free country. That set him off. Of course you defend her. You're her best friend. Aren't you? Grandma. The room froze. We don't talk about you, I said. Evenly. Sure you don't. I bet she says I ruined her life. Classic. Ashley reached to calm him, but he pushed her hand away. Why are you still seeing a woman who hates me? The words hit like a slap. I felt something inside me crack. Years of holding in pain. Of biting my tongue for the sake of family. Not tonight. And so I spoke. And everything changed. Bryn doesn't speak ill of you. Quentin, I said, voice calm but resolute. She's not trying to ruin your business. She's trying to build her own? If she's doing better than you, maybe that says more about your choices than hers. The room went silent. Utensils paused mid-air. Even Martha, always ready with a forced laugh, said nothing. I had never spoken to any of my grandchildren like that. Not in 70 years. But something inside me, something buried, had finally surfaced. Quentin stood abruptly. His chair scraped the hardwood. His face flushed red. You don't know anything about my life, he shouted. You sit in this perfect little house, judging everyone like you're better than us? Warren raised a hand. Quentin, sit down. That's enough. But he wasn't finished. You always loved her more than me, he said, leaning in close. From the moment I brought Bryn around, you looked at her like some treasure. And me, I was never enough. I stood up. 2. Face to face with my grandson. I said the only truth I had left? That's not true. I've always loved you. But love doesn't mean silence. And Bryn, she didn't deserve what you did to her. She's a good girl. Quentin, shut up. He barked, and then it happened. He shoved me. It wasn't a hard push. Not from a young man to an old woman. But it didn't need to be. My balance gave out. I fell backward. The side of my ribs catching the corner of the table. The pain was sharp. Immediate. And the gasp from the room rang louder than the fall. Martha screamed. Warren and Paul rushed to lift me. Quentin just stood there. Frozen. Grandma, I didn't mean get out. Warren said coldly. No one defended him. No one made excuses. They all looked away. Dinner ended right there. The guests left quickly, mumbling about the hour. Martha helped clean up in silence. The birthday cake remained untouched. Later, alone in my armchair, I stared at it. A cake for a woman who had cooked for everyone, but who no one had stood up for. Not when it mattered. I sat there for a long time. Bitterness swirling beneath the bruises. Then the phone rang. Oh, Dora. Happy birthday. It was Bryn, cheerful. Gentle. Unaware of what had happened. I was going to stop by. But thought you might be busy with your family. She said. You can come tomorrow. I answered. Voice steady somehow. I'd love to see you. The next morning, still Sora. I walked slowly to the bank to sign papers for a deposit. As I opened my purse, a crumpled lottery ticket slipped from my wallet, something I'd bought days ago at the grocery store. Mostly to humor the cashier. Later, on the way home, I picked up a newspaper. The numbers were on the back page. I read them once. Then again. All 6 numbers matched. The jackpot $1. 6 million. And I just sat on the nearest bench. Stunned. No joy. No tears. Just one thought. What now? The day after I discovered I was a millionaire. The world didn't look any different, but I did. Something inside me had shifted. Not with excitement. And certainly not with greed. What I felt was clarity. For the first time in years. I saw a purpose forming. Bryn stopped by the next evening. As promised. She brought a bottle of wine and that soft, slightly hesitant smile of hers. I had baked a plum pie using my mother's old recipe. Not just because I wanted to, because I needed to. In our family, major decisions were always made over food. It was our unspoken language. We sat at the dining table. Porcelain plates. Silver cutlery. Everything polished and prepared. Like it was a holiday. I watched Bryn's face light up as she talked about her little cafe. She spoke of flavors and textures and Mediterranean spices. Of the dream she'd never dared to chase. What if, I asked, you had the money to expand? What would you do first? She blinked. Then leaned forward. I'd rent the space next door. She said instantly. It used to be an antique shop. I've already imagined the wall coming down. The open kitchen. The extra tables. I even came up with the name Holloway. After my grandmother, there it was. The spark. The kind I hadn't seen in anyone in this family in years. What's stopping you? She laughed bitterly. What always stops people like us? Money. That night, after she left, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk and drafted a plan. Not a gift, an investment. Not pity partnership. I would stake Bryn. Not just because she deserved it, but because I needed to believe I could still build something that mattered. The next night, I told her, I want to be your business partner. I said, I'll fund the expansion. But I won't be a silent partner. This is our venture. You bring the talent. I bring the capital. Bryn stared at me like I'd grown wings. But you don't have that kind of money. I smiled. Now I do. I told her about the lottery. The forgotten ticket. The miracle. Why me? She asked quietly. Because you're brilliant. And because I need this just as much as you do. Her hands trembled when she reached for her tea. But in her eyes, there was something else? Belief. We talked late into the night. Sketched menus. Discussed the floor plan. Laughed like conspirators. And when she left, she hugged me tight. Not out of gratitude, but solidarity. Don't let me down, I whispered. I won't. She promised. That was the night Holloway was born. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was rebellion, redemption, and rebirth served with rosemary and lemon zest. Not just for her. For me? Too. Word spread fast in Kendallville. That old Odora, the quiet widow with the perfect garden, had become a business partner to her grandson's ex-wife. And not just any business. A restaurant. One that, rumor had it, was going to be the nicest place in the county. People whispered in pews at church. Glanced too long at the grocery store. No one said anything to my face. But they didn't have to. Small towns don't need announcements. Just eyebrows and silence. The one person I hadn't heard from was Quentin. Until one afternoon. When I was reviewing renovation estimates with Bryn and our architect, I felt it. A shadow in the doorway. I turned, and there he was. Quentin. He stood in the dust of the half-finished restaurant. Fists clenched. Jaw tight. Eyes locked on me. He didn't say a word. Just stared. Then turned and walked out. Bryn looked at me. Are you okay? Yes. I lied. But I wasn't. That moment confirmed what I already knew. We weren't just building a restaurant. We were picking a fight he didn't think I had the nerve to start. And he didn't take it quietly. The next week, a window was shattered. Nothing stolen. Just glass and a mess. The police came. Filled out a report. No cameras. No witnesses. Bryn was sure it was him. I wasn't ready to believe it. Then came the reviews, fake ones. All posted the same day. New accounts. Each claiming food poisoning. Bad service. Terrible hygiene. Holloway hadn't even opened yet. We got the platform to remove most of them. But the damage was done. It made the front page of the local paper. Quietly. Of course. Tucked beneath high school sports scores and weather reports. Then came the health inspector. Anonymous complaint. He said. Rats in the kitchen. Complete fabrication. We passed with flying colors. But the timing too perfect. That night, I didn't tell Bryn where I was going. I walked straight into the Apprentice Grill. Tuesday night. Dead quiet. 3 customers. No music. Just the scrape of cutlery and the hum of a struggling business. I found Quentin behind the grill. He looked tired. Gaunt. Older than his age. We need to talk, I said. He didn't argue. Led me to his cluttered office. I didn't dance around it. It's you. The window. The fake reviews. The health complaint. He didn't deny it. I'm losing everything, he said. The restaurant's failing. And you. His voice cracked. You chose her. No. I said. I chose respect. I chose someone who didn't push me down at my own birthday party. He looked away. You ruined me. No. I said again. You did that. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. He didn't cry. But something inside him broke. I could feel it. And then he whispered. Almost like a boy again. What should I do for the first time in years? I reached for his hand. Start over, I said. Somewhere new. Build something real. Not out of anger, but out of love. 2 days after our talk, Quentin called. His voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind it. "Grandma," he said. "I found a buyer for the restaurant. A couple from Fort Wayne. They're turning it into a Mexican bistro. The deal closes next week." There was a pause. "And I've accepted a job in Chicago. Assistant chef at a new place opening downtown. It's not glamorous, but it's something." I felt something shift inside me, relief. Maybe. Or just release. "I'm proud of you." I said, "Really, yes. Starting over takes more courage than staying stuck." Before he hung up, he added quietly, "I'll stop by before I leave." He came the night before his departure. No grand gestures. No apologies. Just a quiet visit. I made his favorite apple pie. The way I used to when he was little, and scraped his knees playing baseball in the yard. We didn't talk about the restaurant. Or Bryn. Or the things we couldn't take back. Instead, we talked about the good stuff. His grandfather. His first kitchen knife. The way he used to sneak spoonfuls of pie filling before it went into the crust. It wasn't closure. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. When he left, he said, "I'll visit. I promise." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Because promises like that are best left floating in the air. Untested. The next week, a letter arrived. Inside was a check. Quentin had repaid the money I'd once given him to open the Apprentice Grill. Money I'd written off long ago. Alongside it was a note. Short. No flowery words. "This is the last debt I had to repay. Now I can start over. Thanks for the lesson. Grandma." It was tough, but it was necessary. I stared at the check for a long time. Then I tore it into pieces. That money had never been a debt. It had been a seed misplanted the first time. But maybe now. Finally. Taking root somewhere better. Bryn noticed the change in me. She could see it in how I moved. How I smiled more. How the stiffness in my shoulders had finally eased. "You look like someone who just dropped a heavy bag at the train station," she joked. Maybe I did. I said, Holloway was thriving. We were already planning for a summer terrace. A second location in Fort Wayne. Maybe even cooking classes in the fall. But more than the success, I felt something I hadn't in decades: peace. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that comes after a long storm has passed. I had set out on this journey fueled by pain and the need for revenge. But what I found was redemption. Not just for me, but for all of us. Summer came fast that year. At Holloway. The air conditioners hummed quietly while the scent of rosemary chicken and lemon tarts drifted through the dining room. I sat at my usual table near the window, going over our monthly financial reports. For the 5th month in a row, we had grown slow and steady. Just like Bryn Saches. Bryn came over between the lunch and dinner shifts, wiping her hands on her apron. What do you think I smiled? Handing her the folder. I think we're doing something right. She grinned. We're doing a lot of things right. And Noah's summer cocktail menu is genius. Half the town's coming in just for his Mediterranean breeze. The restaurant buzzed with life, the same way I once imagined my house would on holidays, but never truly did. I asked about Quentin. She hesitated, then said gently, I think he's doing okay. A friend of mine in Chicago said he's working hard. Showing up on time. Quiet. But focused. Sounds like he's rebuilding. I nodded, unsure how to feel. I didn't want him to fail. I never had. I just wanted him to grow, to stop blaming the world, to find peace without tearing others apart. That night, Bryn and I sat on the terrace, watching the sun dip low. She brought out her old recipe notebook, flipping through dog-eared pages and sketches of dishes that had never made it to the table. I used to think these were just dreams, she said. Now they're plans. That's what happens when someone believes in you, I said softly. She looked at me for a long moment. No one's ever believed in me the way you do. I smiled. Eyes dump. It was never just about food, Bryn. It was about showing the world and maybe myself that it's never too late to build something that matters. A week later, a letter arrived from Chicago. It was from Quentin. Inside was a check again, for the exact amount I'd invested in the Apprentice Grill all those years ago, and a note, this time. I'm not returning the money. I'm repaying the faith. This is a thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. For Holloway. For Bryn. For showing me what strength really looks like. I'm starting over now. And it's because of you. No signature. Just his name. I didn't cash the check. I framed it. Hung it in my study, right next to a photograph of Holloway on opening night, Bryn in her black dress. Me in my favorite cardigan. Both of us smiling. Not because everything had been perfect, but because, somehow, we'd made something beautiful out of the mess. I used to think my story was winding down. That at 70, life had little left to offer. But I was wrong. Sometimes, the best chapters don't start until everyone thinks the book is over.